Well, we're in Selma again, and we have Cindy with us, and we are in the backyard of a very beautiful building. It's an overcast day, but a nice day, cool enough. Cindy, first of all, geographically, tell us where we are.
We're in Selma, Alabama, the very end of Alabama Avenue. And I'm not sure, I think we're probably the west side of Selma, maybe right in the middle of it. About 3 blocks from downtown.
Okay, and we have a home here, which is now a museum. Tell us about it.
Well, it was never a home. It was built as a school by the Masons, and it was for children of poor Masons and orphans of Masons. And that was the Masons' philanthropy, was education, about 1847 when this was built. It's also been 3 separate hospitals: Confederate Hospital, a Freedmen's Bureau hospital, which makes this the first black hospital in Selma, and it was a Vaughan Memorial Hospital. It's also been the Dallas County Courthouse, and is the reason Selma's the seat of Dallas County. We kind of bribed the government to come here from Cahaba. They were having some water problems with the river coming up, and we said, well, we've got this brand new nice building, barely used, just come on up here. It's never been underwater, so they moved it here. And it was a courthouse until about 1902 when they built a new courthouse, which we're still using. It's been a military school for a short time, and then it was the Vaughan Memorial Hospital from 1911 until 1960. And after that, it sat vacant for about 10 years, and Mayor Smitherman saved it from falling down and turned it into a civic and historic building, and it's kind of developed into a museum.
Let's go back with some of the names that you mentioned. Vaughan, who was that?
Dr. Samuel Watkins Vaughan was a physician in the 1800s. His son and grandson used the money from his estate to buy the building to continue his work. He was a very interesting man from what I understand, and you may not have enough time to hear a lot of the stories about him.
Well, go ahead, tell me some stories.
Well, one in particular, and I may not get all the details right because I just read it one time, but he did serve in the Civil War, took his slave with him. Now, I don't know the slave's name, but they both served, they both killed Yankees. And when they came home, the slave would tell people he killed 2 Yankees. Well, as the years went by, he seemed to have killed more and more Yankees until one day his sons and grandchildren came to Dr. Vaughan and said, Doctor, Daddy says he killed 1,000 Yankees. Is that true? And Dr. Vaughan, not wanting to lessen the man in the eyes of his family, said, well, I've never known him to lie. And then he got to thinking and said, well, anybody that killed 1,000 Yankees for the Confederacy should be getting a pension. So after that, a check started arising from the Confederate government as a pension for this former slave, who proudly went to the bank and cashed it every month.
I bet he did. Yeah. Very good. Okay, so that is Dr. Vaughan.
That's Dr. Vaughan.
Okay, then you mentioned another gentleman. And that was the mayor.
Mayor Smitherman was, his name was Joseph T. Smitherman. He was mayor here for 36 years. He came in 1965. 64, I think, was when he was elected, and served until the year 2000 when Mayor Perkins defeated him. He was here during the Civil Rights Movement. He actually came in right at the height of the movement and probably made it possible for a lot of the things that happened to happen. He told the sheriff he had no more authority within the city limits of Selma, so that the civil rights leaders were able to meet. He appointed Wilson Baker as a liaison to help the voters or the marchers get from where they gathered to the county courthouse to protest. He met with the civil rights leaders every afternoon, and actually appointed the first black head of a department in 1969, I believe.
So he really didn't mind upsetting an apple cart, for sure.
Well, he was trying to move us slowly into it, and I don't know that he was liberal or a real forward-thinking man, but he was a very smart man, and he knew what was going to happen anyway, and he just wanted to try to get Selma there with the least amount of trouble and bloodshed as possible.
Now, you said that he saved this building.
It was falling apart. There was a man up the street that used to come down here once a week and look for his cat, have to crawl through the windows because there was nobody here, and no glass in the panes,
My
but
goodness.
he literally saved it from falling apart. And they restored it and turned it into the historic building
Oh, so it became a historic building at that time.
at that time.
Now, we call it a museum. For those who haven't visited here, tell us some of the artifacts that are inside this building.
Well, we've got a lot of different things in this building. We actually have the Art Lewis collection, which is a collection of documents and photographs collected by a local businessman who's no longer here. But his family has loaned this to us so that we can share it with other people. There's some very interesting things in there, including a Dix dollar, which they say is where the term Dixie came from. It stands for 10 in French, and it's a $10 bill printed English on one side, French on the other. And they used to say that's down in the land of the Dixes, which is where Dixie evolved from. There's some slavery posters, wanted posters, even a letter about a woman whose husband had been killed by a slave, and by law she was required to protect his property, so she had to hire a defense attorney to defend the man who had killed her husband.
My goodness.
It shows how convoluted the whole thing was.
Yeah. How many floors do we have?
We have 3 floors.
3 floors. Now, of course, when it was a hospital, the entire building was used, one way or the other, patient rooms, administration, doctor's offices.
Right. The first floor were doctor's offices, examination rooms. Second floor were patient rooms, and the third floor were the operating rooms and maternity ward. And today our third floor is our hospital floor. We've outfitted the entire third floor so you can go back and see what a hospital looked like during that time period.
The home itself, was it ever a hospital during the Civil War?
Yes, it was a Confederate hospital, and there is an account in the library of an orderly who had been a prisoner of war down at Castle Morgan and then brought up here to work in the hospital, where he slipped away and sat on the roof and watched the Battle of Selma unfold.
My goodness. And so evidently that's the reason why it also survived a lot of the burning that went on in the city.
Yes, and plus I think it was on the opposite side of the part that burned. I don't know for sure. Now, I've heard 2/3 of the city burned, but I'm probably right in thinking that it was the area around the foundry, the Confederate Naval Foundry, that burned, because that was Wilson's objective in coming to Selma.
Right.
And there's also stories that a lot of the cotton bales caught on fire, so that would have been Water Avenue. And around the Old Depot Museum is where the foundry was.
Because I mean, like the story you told us about the slave and how many Yankees he killed. People will say, "Well, Selma burned. Oh, the whole thing. Oh, everything went." And I guess not. It was kind of segregated to places that they actually wanted to get rid of.
Probably, but once cotton starts burning, you're going to have the filaments in the air that float, and so I'm not sure what would have caught.
Right.
But being as this was on the opposite end of town, I don't think they would have come this way to set a fire. If something over here burned, it was probably by accident.
Well, now the city actually owns this museum. Is that correct?
Yes, it does.
And of course the funds generated are from the admission to it, or is it free?
No, there is a $3 admission, and we're open Tuesday through Saturday from 9 until 4. We do close for lunch between 12 and 1.
Now, do you have any special activities here?
We rent it out for weddings and receptions, and the grounds are beautiful, so it makes a great setting for an outdoor wedding.
I was just looking at it. There's a lot of grounds here with a house. Behind us, we have a building. What is that?
That is all that's left of the Hotel Albert. We have the columns from it. It's the most famous building in Selma, and it's no longer here. It took 36 years to build. The first group of people ran out of money, and then it sat vacant through the Civil War with no roof on it. And I've heard stories that the Union and Confederate soldiers stabled their horses on the first floor. But after the war, they built it up, sold stock in it, and wanted Selma to be a resort town, so we needed a 4-star hotel. And that building had been patterned after the Palace of Doges in Venice, and it was incredible.
My goodness.
And when it came down in 1970, I'm not sure, 72, they saved those columns and brought them over here, and it also started our Historic Preservation Society.
I see. Well, it really is a fascinating story about this building, and just one of the many fascinating stories about Selma, Alabama. And once again, for our viewers, if you would give us the hours of operations and how we can get more information.
Well, we're open Tuesday through Saturday from 9 until 4. Close at lunch from 12 to 1. And you can call the Chamber of Commerce and get more information, or you can call here, and the number would be 334-874-2174. Now, one thing I would like to mention, since we are doing this for the Battle of Selma, we do have some ammunition that was made at the Confederate Naval Foundry, which was actually supplied half the ammunition for the Confederacy and a third of the cannons and guns, and the CSS Tennessee was built here at the foundry. So we have some memorabilia from that time, which is pretty interesting to me.
So come on down.
Oh yeah, we'll be happy to give you a tour. Might even throw in a few extra stories if the mood strikes.